Let's answer some of your questions. We'll get right to it. At Dorian is not gray, which I am convinced is a Tom Brady burner account. How much action do you think Taysom Hill will get against the Bears? I'm going to start this one, Charean, because I think back to last year's wildcard playoff game. That is when the Saints unleashed Taysom Hill. He was the best player on the field. This is where you throw caution to the wind. And I know they've been careful about Taysom Hill earlier this year, and they had to have him ready to play quarterback. If you want to win this game, this is when you put your best 11 players on the field and you use them. So I think we're going to see a lot of Taysom Hill against the Bears.
Well, he played 23 of 56 snaps against the Vikings last year in that playoff game. I think it'll be similar to that, but every time he was on the field, Mike, he was handling the ball. He had a ton of touches in that game. I think it's going to be like that again. And one of the reasons why, you think of Alvin Kamara coming back from COVID. You think of Michael Thomas and Deontay Harris coming back from their injuries. They haven't played in a while. What's their conditioning going to be like? We don't know that. But I would be willing to bet that those guys might have some sort of a pitch count. I know it's the playoffs. You hope you can win this game, though, by not using those guys as much. Taysom Hill is ready to go. We've seen it. He's fresh. He's good. He's in football shape. I expect to see a lot of him, maybe even more than the 23 snaps that he played last year.
Hey, Red Zone out. Who do you trust more in the playoffs, Lamar Jackson, Charean, or Josh Allen? Who you got?
I don't know that we can trust either one of them, Mike, because we haven't seen it, right? I mean, neither one has won a playoff game. I guess if I'm going to say, I'll go with Josh Allen just because he's had the better regular season, but that doesn't always translate to the postseason. As we saw last year with Lamar Jackson, it didn't translate in the postseason. So I'm not trusting either one until they completely get it done in the postseason and win a postseason game, and they haven't done that yet. They haven't proved they can do it.
One thing that the Bills did last year that I thought they might do when they got to the playoffs, they unleashed Josh Allen as a runner, and I have no problem with that. Yeah. It's those awkward moments that we saw a few of, most notably the over-the-head lateral thing, and I think that that's something that happens when he presses, and when he doesn't have the help around him is when he's more likely to press. He's got the help around him now. He's matured as a player. He's improved as a player. I have more faith in him than I do in Lamar Jackson, because for Lamar Jackson, we've seen it twice now. Spectacular performances in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, it just goes the other way. And until you can shed that vibe, that feeling, until you can get past that, the chances of it happening again are still there. And because it's happened twice now, I think the pressure gets a little bit greater. And if it happens this year, the pressure is going to be a little greater the next year. So I agree with you. I trust Josh Allen a little bit more, or maybe a lot more than Lamar Jackson. Uncle Phil, what's the starting point, in your opinion, for a Deshaun Watson trade package? Charean, this is one that I threw out there last night, and maybe it would take more than the first overall pick in the draft. But remember, if you're trading the first overall pick in the draft this year, you're not trading the first pick. You're trading Trevor Lawrence. Would you trade, if you're the Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson straight up for Trevor Lawrence? I think maybe you would.
Oh, that's tough. I do know this. Bill O'Brien is not there, so they're not going to give him away like they gave away DeAndre Hopkins. That's one thing I do know. It's going to take a lot more of a package put together to get Deshaun Watson. If I'm the Jaguars, I probably take that. Now, if I'm Houston, you're sending him to somebody in the same division, so I don't know that I'm going to do that. That's tough to do that in the same division. That's the only reason I think I pause on it. But if you can't repair that bridge with Deshaun Watson, then you're going to have to get rid of him, and you're going to want a high pick plus other picks because you got to find a quarterback now, right? They don't just grow on trees, Mike.
Right. And here's what you do. Here's the starting point, actually, because I'm fascinated by the possibility of a straight-up Trevor Lawrence for Deshaun Watson trade, especially since they both went to Clemson. What you do is you make it known he's available, and you sit back and wait. That's the starting point, because you don't have to ask for anything once it's known that Deshaun Watson's available. You just sit back and the offers come in, and you sift through the offers, and you use one to get more from the other, and you maximize via negotiation how far everyone is willing to go, and then you ultimately pick one, and you hope that that's a place Deshaun Watson wants to go, because I think that's part of it too. That's the real starting point, because it isn't going to be the Texans negotiating with one team. It's going to be the Texans presiding over an auction that many teams will attend. If they want to trade him, if they eventually give in to his desire to be traded, if he does desire to be traded, they could get a load of picks and players in return because they will be lining up out the door for the chance to get Deshaun Watson. All right, let's take a break. We'll answer more of your questions as we wrap up this Friday edition of PFT PM right after this. All right, let's jam in as many more of these questions as we can. Gong Show West, with the #1 pick and all that cap space, do you have any confidence that the Jaguars' brain trust will make the right personnel decisions for next season? Well, let me just handle this one easily, because I didn't want to do this one, because we've already talked about the Jaguars. They're trying to knock us off the air. We still got 4 minutes. Don't take us off the air. Don't pull the plug on us yet. They don't have a brain trust yet. We don't know who their brain trust is. Once we know who their brain trust is, then we'll decide whether or not they're going to screw this up. Let me move on to the next one. Jaman Javian, out of all the wild card games this weekend, which has the biggest chance of featuring an upset by the underdog, Charean?
Well, I think you got to go with the Titans, Mike, just because they've proved that they can do it. They've beaten Baltimore the last two times they've played, including the postseason last year. They know how to do it. They've got the motivation. They've got Derrick Henry, and the Ravens haven't shown yet that they know how to stop Derrick Henry. And if they can't stop Derrick Henry, they're not going to win that game.
Jack 9298, over under Derrick Henry rushing yards in that game, 150.
Whew. I think I'm going to go under, but he is going to get over 100 yards, but I think he's going to get less than he got in the postseason last year. Somewhere around the 133, I think it was, that he had in the regular season is my guess.
They have no chance to win if he doesn't get 100. Now, as I say that, I am envisioning a box score where the Titans win, and he has 97 yards rushing. So I retract that statement before I have to self-report myself to Old Takes Exposed. They need a big day from Derrick Henry, and he has a chance to go over 150. He was over 190 last year. Tom G. Post, what would it take for Howie Roseman, a.k.a. Jeffrey Lurie's adopted son, to get fired by the Eagles? Of course, Roseman, the executive VP of football operations and general manager. What would it take, Charean?
Well, I think they're all on notice, Mike, going into next season with what happened this season. They expected a better year from this team. Carson Wentz regressed. I don't know how any of those guys are secure beyond 2021, right? They've all got to be under pressure to perform better this year, or they're all gone.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Jeffrey Lurie has fired his last two coaches when they failed to make it to the postseason in consecutive years. Andy Reid had 2 straight no playoffs. He was out. By the way, spoiler alert, it's turned out well for Andy Reid. Chip Kelly had a season of the playoffs and then 2 seasons without, and he was gone. So I agree with you. At a minimum, Doug Peterson's going to be out. I still think there's it's died down, but I don't, after what happened last week, I don't know. Could Peterson be out? I don't think he is. But I just wonder whether it's sustainable. And that leads to this last question we'll take. In Quaid Chai, are we right in saying the Giants need to learn from the logic of the Eagles? At the end of the last season, Washington lost to the Giants, and that's the difference between Chase Young versus Jeff Okudah. It pays to tank sometimes. And this gets back to, and we're going to finish the week where we started, there is a reason for the Eagles doing what they did. And if the Giants had just lost to Washington last year, they'd have Chase Young, and maybe they'd be playing Tom Brady tomorrow night. But it's the way it happened in that last game of the regular season where we were led to believe that they were going to try to win. We saw that tanking in a very conspicuous spot that embarrassed the NFL and embarrassed the Eagles the way it happened. So, yes, it does pay, but you better set it up the right way or you're going to do more damage than good to yourself, Charean.
And you better pick the right player, Mike. We've seen before when teams have done this and they've picked the wrong player. So you have to pick the right player, too.
Well, there's always benefit in being higher than lower, and that's what the Eagles will try to remind everyone between now and late April. They have the 6th spot, not the 9, and now they have to make the best of it. Make the best of this weekend. Enjoy the games. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.